Good evening, I'm Luke Margolis, and welcome to News 12 New Jersey's Republican primary debate for the U.S. Senate. The primary election is less than 2 weeks away, so this evening we will be bringing you the first of two Senate debates that you'll see on News 12 New Jersey. I'd like to welcome tonight's guests, your Republican candidates. He's the former longtime mayor of Bogota and the former state director of Americans for Prosperity, Steve Lonegan. And she is a practicing physician from Somerset County and the founder of the Zarephath Health Center, Dr. Alieta Eck. Thank you both for being here tonight.
Good to be here.
We're going to sort of dispense with the traditional approach here, and we're really going to treat this as a little bit more of a, we'll call it a joint interview. Now, we have plenty of stuff to go over tonight and a limited amount of time to do it, so let's get right at it. We'll start first, Mayor Lonegan, if you'll field the first question. I want to start with a subject that has gathered quite a lot of attention this week. It has to do with the idea of New Jersey getting its fair share of federal dollars. We've heard a lot about New Jersey being a giver state and how we get about roughly 60 cents for every dollar we send to Washington, D.C. My question to you is, do you believe New Jersey is getting its fair share of federal spending? And if not, what will you do to bring more of that back as a senator?
Josh, that goes to the whole heart and soul of one of the big problems facing this country and this income redistribution programs that have pretty much taken over our economy. We have this political mechanism in Washington where Washington politicians decide how to redistribute our wealth, the wealth of job producers and average working Americans. New Jersey's feeling the brunt of that. So one of the most important things we need to do to return to fairness is to dismantle the IRS as we know it, flatten the tax rates, cut corporate income tax, and reduce the burden on hardworking New Jersey taxpayers. I'm going to work very, very hard to do that in Washington.
Dr. Eck, what about you? Do you believe that New Jersey is being shortchanged by Washington, D.C.?
Actually, a lot of the states are being shortchanged. And my interest is the Medicaid system. We send $7.2 billion to Washington, and because we get such a small percentage of it back, we have to beg for it back, and we get $5.8 billion back with strings attached. So why do we send it there in the first place when you're going to be taking care of the poor locally anyway? So I think that a lot of those programs, we send the money to Washington, and then they put the strings on and then send it back, and we have to get permission to spend it the way we would want to spend it.
And Luke, the doctor's absolutely right. That's the political system I'm talking about. The whole political redistribution system of taking money and politicians deciding how they're going to give it back to us, and we have to go on bended knee to return. I'm not going to go on bended knee. I'm going to go on all two feet, both feet,
both feet,
yeah, and stop them from taking it, not how they give it back.
The reason that I started with that is not only is this discussion timely, but also the overarching really narrative that we've had here in New Jersey over the past few months has had a lot to do with Superstorm Sandy and our recovery from that. And we are in the process now of distributing quite a lot of federal money as it relates to Superstorm Sandy. And let's take it a step back. And I know that there have been some concerns about this process from the beginning. And we'll start first with you, Dr. Eck. Do you believe, or would you have, I would say, have signed on with the original Sandy relief package as it was presented so many months ago, back when we were entering into the New Year period?
Well, back when it was first proposed, I think it was something like $60 billion, a huge amount of money. And I was always suspicious as to how they would spend it. And sure enough, it seems like a lot of it went to pay for consultants before it went to actually provide the relief. And the real relief was coming from the grassroots. The people were coming over from Pennsylvania, they were coming from other states, and were helping immediately. And it seemed like that was such a better way to deal with these huge issues.
So you would not have supported the initial, if you were casting a vote as a United States Senator, you would have withheld your vote, or you would have voted against it until further checks and balances would have been in place? Is that a fair way to say it?
I would say we need to be so careful of how we spend the taxpayers' money, and to just these huge amounts of money that there's so little accountability. I would have questioned it.
And Mayor Lonegan, you did question it immediately as well. I believe, in fact, you had some very serious concerns. You went on record as saying you did not support that. Is that correct?
That's true. And I would have voted no on it just because of the same reasons as Dr. Eck said, but because we've created this system now where the government is going to bail out every crisis, and politicians pile on and just add every pork barrel spending project they can think of to that spending program. And one of the big hypocrisies we saw was that within weeks of the passing of the Hurricane Sandy bill, when the New Jersey State Legislature pushed a bill to require project labor agreements, that's union wages, be paid on virtually all of Hurricane Sandy relief projects, which just shows that it was all political. So, you know, one of the reasons we're able to give out these massive programs of unlimited money, and you're going to see over time, we're going to see over time how much waste there really is because of the Federal Reserve's bank ability to just print money at will. And this is happening throughout government.
But certainly, neither of you could deny the fact that there are still thousands of New Jersey residents who are struggling to get back into their homes, to make the necessary repairs, and they're relying on some of this money from the federal government to make that happen. Governor Christie has said if that money had been here sooner, we would have been able to do more with it. How do you
And
respond?
a lot of people are still waiting for that money, aren't they? A lot of money isn't getting to where it's supposed to be. A lot of money is going into government programs, and a lot of money over the couple of years to come is going to be wasted. Billions is going to be wasted, and there's going to be lots of stories about it, Luke. And a lot of people say, well, we should just spend like crazy because it's a crisis. I would have been there at least to be a voice to slow down the spending, to question how it's used, and making sure it was more reasonable, more practical.
Dr. Eck, what's your answer to those folks who say, look, I've took care of my end of the bargain, where's the federal government to assist me as they have so many other people?
The federal flood insurance was slow in coming, and that's odd because the private insurance companies, they're pretty quick at paying up if there's a fire in the house. It's paid up. In fact, we did have a fire in our house, and within 2 months they wanted to wrap it all up. Why is it taking so long when it's the federal money? And if these people paid into an insurance program, if it's really insurance, why didn't it get paid up faster? People who had the flood insurance were not getting their houses fixed up very quickly.
And I want to let me give you one more on this subject as well. You know, we've hear from a lot of people and a lot of the stories that we've been doing from many of these devastated areas, and there's this real palpable sense of frustration. Much of which is what you just were talking about, Doctor, with this flood insurance payout taking forever to come through, and this general sense of anger over red tape, perhaps, if not duplicitous practices, frustrating practices from insurance companies. If you're elected to Senate and to represent these folks in Washington, D.C., how will you go about streamlining these processes, cutting the red tape, forcing insurance companies to live up to their end of the bargain? What do you see your role as a U.S. Senator in that regard? Mayor Lonegan, we'll start.
Well, my number one role as a U.S. Senator is to defend individual liberty. That's my number one goal. That's everything by which I will be measured the votes I cast. We need to really dismantle this massive bureaucracy in Washington, D.C. We need to return control to the states, to local governments. Government has gotten too big, too intrusive, too expensive, and it's throttling America's productivity and economic progress, economic prosperity. That's a huge, huge problem, Luke. It means going into Washington, D.C., rolling up your sleeves and taking on the bureaucracy every day.
Dr. Eck?
I find that insurance companies are not that slow at taking care of the people who have paid the premiums because they want to keep them. And there's a lot of insurance companies to choose from, so if one is not very good, the reputation gets out there. When it's the federal government doing or pretending to be an insurance company and it's slow, where do you go? There's no place else to go. So
are you then sort of, as for those folks who have paid up their insurance premiums but have not yet received some sort of payout or feel as if the compensation they're getting is not just?
That should be part of the Department of Banking and Insurance, which is a state issue, ought to be dealing with that. It's not really a federal issue.
Okay. I want to move on to a different topic here because we do have so much time and so much ground to cover and so little time to do it.
So little time. And Luke, you just got to recognize I also did just dump a cup of water into my lap.
Well, we will be sure to factor that into the fairness of the question asking. Of course, we'll do what we can to help you out there. I want to jump to a topic that Dr. Eck, we'll start with you on this one. Something that you've been quite passionate about and quite outspoken about as a pillar of your campaign, and of course, we're talking about healthcare. You have not been shy in your wishes to repeal the president's healthcare reform, and so I ask you. If you go to the United States Senate and you are successful in participating in a repeal of this, what is your plan to deal with the presumably tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of people in the state of New Jersey who will now be without health care coverage?
Great question. The whole purpose of Obamacare ostensibly was to take care of people who had no insurance, but we use a sledgehammer instead of a scalpel to fix the problem. So why didn't we just deal with the actual problem of the people who are uninsured? That's where my passion has been for the past 10 years in the Zarephath Health Center. And we have found that when you use volunteer physicians and nurses, you can take care of the people at such a fraction of what it costs when the government does it. And for us, it's $13 per patient visit. And these people, they come in with stories that are heart-wrenching, and so it's a real pleasure to be able to just to help them, to be there for them. When the government does it, it's a huge bureaucracy, it's a 60-page form to fill out, and Obamacare is not going to solve that problem. The Medicaid system is so bloated, and it costs $13 billion in New Jersey, and our state budget is $33 billion. It's, again, all paperwork. People can't find a doctor because they barely pay the doctor anything. So when the government does it, it just winds up not being very good for the patients. And so I think a better way would be to use real charity. And then,
is there enough of that to go around? I mean, will you just be setting up a system whereby folks will be left searching for the few clinics across the state that do provide that type of service?
We have a plan, and that's kind of why I was able to get all these signatures to get on this ballot, was because I promoting this plan here in New Jersey, where doctors would donate 4 hours a week, and the state then would protect the physician in their private practices. So instead of all the billing back and forth, instead of all the forms and the paperwork and all of that, you just care for people as real charity and don't expect to be paid.
Mayor, I want
Luke, I'll tell you, this is the most charitable country in the world. To question the charitability of Americans is really sells them a little bit short. And we also give away billions and billions of dollars in aid overseas, foreign aid. Maybe we should start worrying about Americans. Maybe we should bring back those charity hospitals, these charity clinics like Dr. Eck's, like the hospital I was born in, Holy Name Hospital, all those Catholic and Jewish and Protestant hospitals around the country that serve the needs of Americans for so many years. We need to provide free market solutions to the health insurance issue, the health care issue, such as health savings accounts, expanding the use of health savings accounts, the ability to buy insurance across state lines, and most especially to put tort reform, to put an end to the malpractice lawsuits that do so much damage to the healthcare industry. So there are much better solutions than Obamacare. Obamacare must be repealed, it must be defunded before it does even more damage.
What about this idea of forcing insurance companies to pick up folks despite pre-existing conditions? Do you worry at all that if you repeal the Affordable Care Act, or Obamacare as you've referred to it, that folks will not be able to acquire coverage on an open market, even if they had the funding to do so?
New Jersey has the most expensive health insurance in the country, one of the most, if not the most, because of what's called guaranteed access and community ratings. If you go to a state like Texas or Pennsylvania, you can buy health insurance much cheaper than the state of New Jersey. That's because it's so overregulated, and you're seeing those same regulations brought on the federal level across all the states. Over time, this is going to damage our healthcare industry, our healthcare profession, and actually cut services to Americans because there'll be less of a supply.
Dr. Eck, one more for you on this topic, and then we can move on to another one. Look, I know that the president has won re-election here in New Jersey with quite strong numbers, and so I wonder if this push, do you feel like there is enough public support in New Jersey to warrant one of its United States senators pushing for a repeal of this? I mean, do you worry at all about the fact that this might not necessarily be the will of the people to do something like this?
I think if it's not the will of the people, it's because they don't understand the law. I think when people find that they're going to be forced to pay way too much for insurance that they couldn't afford in the first place. And I had a woman come into the clinic just yesterday. She came in because she had problems with, she was working, she couldn't afford the insurance that was being offered by her employer, and she had other people who were sick in her household and was barely making ends meet. We had to supply her with her medicines, and then we had food and clothing across the way for her. If she suddenly is going to be forced to be buying insurance that she can't afford, or be taxed and in a sense fined for not buying it, that's kind of a cruel way to deal with people who are struggling. And so I think that's what's going to happen. So people who love this law don't understand it. Another
topic that has caught a lot of attention this week has a lot to do with this concept of balancing privacy and security. And I know, Mayor Lonegan, this is something that you've talked about frequently. And it's something, in fact, we spoke with you about earlier this week, but I want to touch on it again. And it has to be viewed, at least in New Jersey, through the prism of September 11th. There are an awful lot of people here in New Jersey who have a very visceral and strong and painful memory that's still attached to that date, and this idea of doing whatever you have to do to prevent something like that from happening again is a high priority for them. And that is what leads us to this concept of the NSA's wireless or warrantless wiretapping program that you have been so passionate in speaking out against. Mm-hmm. And I'm wondering, if you do go to Washington to represent the folks of New Jersey, how do you strike a balance between what you have referred to as protecting personal liberties and making sure that something like that, like September 11th, doesn't ever happen again?
I'm not going to watch this war on terrorism result in us tearing up our Constitution. And I don't want to have my individual liberty destroyed in order to defend my liberty or against terrorism. So 9/11 can be defended against through proper use of investigation, police work, et cetera. It doesn't mean we have to gather data on every single American. Doesn't mean they have to have my phone bills, access to my emails. We just learned under this program called eKeystone that the NSA can go into our emails, listen to our phone messages. Low-level staffers allegedly can do this. That's unbelievable. They're gathering data on all of us, on everything we do, whether it's our health care, whether it's financial transactions. They're gathering our phone bills. They're gathering it all under the claim that they could defend us against terrorism. That's nonsense. The government does not and should not have this kind of power. As Patrick Henry said, government in its best case is a necessary evil, and we're learning that once again.
Dr. Eck, what about your philosophy on this idea of protecting us at all costs?
Well, I think even getting back to what's going to go on with Obamacare, with this data hub, where they're hiring 175,000 people, 20 hours worth of education, and they're going to be able to get into our financial records and our medical records so that our privacy is going to be completely gone, all in the guise of protecting us or giving us health care. It's the government just overreach that is, again, it is taking away our liberties. And the purpose of the Constitution was to preserve our liberties.
I know that we'll switch gears a little bit here and jump to sort of more of a campaign question than so much an issues question. But the two of you have had very similar approaches to governing, to a lot of the issues that we've talked about so far. And I want to get an opportunity to try to have you draw some distinctions between yourselves as candidates. And Dr. Eck, I want to start with you first on this one. You know, how do you see yourself as a different candidate than Mayor Lonegan?
I see myself as somebody who has lived through watching the problems and have actually provided solutions, more than just theory. And therefore, I believe that I have actual solutions to the problems we face, especially in healthcare. I've raised 5 children in this state. I found that we're not providing them with a more prosperous state than I grew up in. It's harder for our kids than it was for us. And we're the first generation that's doing that. What has gone wrong? So there are many things where I think that the government overreach is part of the problem, and we could back it down and just provide more opportunity and more liberty and more prosperity for our children and grandchildren.
Mayor, why you over Dr. Eck?
I don't think there's any difference in what we believe in between myself and Dr. Eck. We both believe in liberty and limited government. The difference is between me, Dr. Eck, and the Democrat candidates, because all 4 of the Democrat candidates are virtually identical. They're going to be rubber stamps for the Obama agenda. They're going to, well, I shouldn't say that, actually. Rush Holt voted the right way on the Amash Amendment and voted to stop the NSA's intrusion of our privacy. Cory Booker, on the other hand, appears to stand up and support the NSA's use of surveillance.
We will have plenty of time to dive into that.
Good.
But this is a primary debate. I mean, certainly voters are going to go into a voting booth and have both of your names on there. And I want you to make a case as to why it should be either of you.
Well, the point is that Dr. Eck brings a lot to the table. I have a lot of experience in government. I was a mayor for 12 years. I've been effective in stopping things like the Corzine toll road hikes, the taking of our toll roads back in 2007. I stopped the embryonic stem cell bill from passing, which would have put $450 million into embryonic stem cell research. Would have been lost by now by the state of New Jersey. I stopped Jim McGreevy's toll hike, and I stopped the, Jim McGreevy's gas hike back in '92. Or 02, I'm losing track of the years. So, I've been out there on the forefront of issues for taxpayers now for 2 decades and had some terrific successes, and I want to bring that ability to succeed to Washington.
If either of you, I should say, are elected, you will technically be replacing Jeff Chiesa, who's there right now serving in a placeholder position. And I want to just get back to an issue. One of the first ones he was faced with when he went down to Washington, D.C. was immigration reform. And it's a big topic that presumably we're going to have some movement on in Washington soon. And if you are down there, I wonder what it is you see as the top priority in dealing with that problem. Mayor Lonegan, we'll start with you since, Dr. Eck, you had the last question first.
Well, I would have been, I had urged Mr. Chiesa to vote no. I would have voted no on the amnesty bill. I would push for breaking it up into small pieces. I would start by securing our borders, then addressing the immigration issue. how to deal with current immigrants as well as new immigrants coming in. As you said, there's going to be movement on this. I doubt it. There hasn't been movement for 20 years. So
there at least seems to now be a little
they've been talking about it for that long, too. Yeah, there's been attempts, and the attempts keep failing because nobody really knows what to do or has the guts to do what needs to be done.
What is it
what
that
we
needs to be
need
done?
to do is we need to secure the borders and, first of all, stop the problem. We need to change the quota system to allow enough workers and people to come to this nation to work and fill the needs of economic growth. And then we have to deal with existing immigrants in this country. My solution would be a simple one, that existing undocumented workers should find a sponsor, just like a legal immigrant has to do. And if a sponsor is willing to say, yeah, I'll sponsor you, I'll make sure you have a roof over your head, and you're not going to become part of the nation's welfare programs, like a legal immigrant has to do, like my grandparents had to do when they came here from Italy, almost 90 years ago, that's the way to solve it. Or something along those lines. But you know what? Nobody's waved a magic wand and come up with a really great, terrific answer. It's a difficult question. The way to answer it is not by coming up with some 2,500-page bill that nobody understands, which is what they tried to do again.
Dr. Eck, do you have a magic wand or a magic answer for this problem?
Well, I'd have to agree that unless you have some kind of a way to secure the border, if you have a porous border and a very generous welfare state, that's a recipe for disaster for the American people. The taxpayers won't be able to handle that. We actually have commercials in Mexico on how to get onto food stamps if you get into the United States. And to me, that is appalling to do that to the American taxpayers who have to foot that bill. There have to be compassionate ways to deal with the people who are here. And I think of children who came when they were 2 years old, and now they've never lived in any other country.
I believe
There's got to be a way.
Is usually a way that's referred to.
There has to be some way to deal with that. But until you secure the border and be like every other country on earth, where we know who's coming in and who's going out, we are not a safe country, and we need to fix that.
I want to, we are, amazingly enough, coming down the stretch here, so I want to make sure that we address this topic first and foremost. New Jersey hasn't sent a Republican to the U.S. Senate in more than 40 years. Make your case now as to why you should be the one to break that streak. Dr. Eck, we'll start with you.
I've been a Republican all my life, and the reason I've been a Republican is Republicans believe in smaller government, because the smaller the government, the more liberty we have, and that is the essence of the Constitution. I've lived in New Jersey all my life. If I were sent there, I'd be the first woman to go to the Senate from the state of New Jersey, and I think it's about time that we have somebody I'm a doctor and a mother of 5, and I know how to solve problems. Maybe that's what we need, is somebody to solve problems and maybe not have big egos down there that seems to always be fighting with each other. Come on, let's work together and let's solve the problems of the United States.
Mayor Lonegan.
New Jersey's had Democrat senators now for 32 years, almost 40 years. In the beginning, we had Clifford Case for a while. But over that course of time, we've watched New Jersey drop to one of the worst states in the nation for getting money back from the federal government and paying the most to the federal government. So it hasn't worked. The formula hasn't worked. It's time to change it. And it's time you had a senator who stood up for our conservative values. New Jersey is not the hopelessly liberal state that pundits say it is. If anything, it's a state that's made up of the core work values that have built this country. And those values and our privacy and our individual liberty are under attack. A U.S. Senate candidate who's willing to stand boldly on those issues and govern on those issues will be an articulate spokesman for the people of New Jersey and can make a real difference. And I think having a team of Governor Christie in Trenton and me in Washington will benefit this state tremendously.
How important is this concept of bipartisanship for you, finding a middle ground, compromise? Mayor Lonegan.
Finding a middle ground with Barack Obama means agreeing with everything he says. There is no such thing as a middle ground with the liberal left. If you don't go for everything they say, then they throw you under the bus. Like Nancy Pelosi said, she'll do whatever she had to do to pass that bill, even if she had a pole vault. So they don't find a middle ground. And there is no middle ground for me on defending individual liberty. I will not compromise 1 inch.
Dr. Eck, do you look at bipartisanship and compromise as sort of a either, if not a nasty word, something unable to be achieved at this point?
I've been working in New Jersey on this law. We have a bill, S2231, which would provide the 4 hours a week of doctor-donated services in clinics for malpractice protection in their practices. And bipartisan support, we have a Democrat and a Republican have listened to my reasoning and have agreed, and so they have sponsored this bill. We have I'll work across the aisle with anybody who agrees with common sense solutions instead of just the rhetoric that seems to divide rather than bring us together.
You know, Luke, I was the mayor of Bogota for 12 years. Bogota is a 2-to-1 Democrat town, pretty traditional, pretty much a microcosm of New Jersey. And I often had councils that were 3-to-3 Democrat to Republican, 2-to-4, 4-to-2. So I always had to work with the other side. But you can do it in a way where you can achieve results without giving up on your principles. And that's something I'm absolutely committed to in the U.S. Senate.
Do you view yourself, there's been a lot of talk about how the Tea Party has changed the way the Republican Party is currently structured, and some say it's revitalized the base, others say it's pulled them too far to the right. Do you view yourselves as Tea Partiers? Mayor, we'll start with you.
I think the Tea Party movement has done a terrific job of putting a backbone in the Republican Party and will continue to do so whether they like it or not, because you always look at the conscience of the Republican Party and of the conservative movement, because they basically are an eclectic group of people from all walks of life who believe in the Constitution of the United States and are ready to stand up, and they're not just going to fold because of liberal media assaults or because they're politically incorrect. So they serve a terrific purpose, and I'm proud to say that I was part of that Tea Party movement. But that's sort of changing now and evolving with the times, and they will be a big part of my win come October.
Dr. Eck, would you care to respond to that last point there?
My ancestor witnessed the first Tea Party. Her name was Mercy Otis Warren in
That's cool.
The original
in
Tea Party.
Massachusetts, the very first one in Massachusetts. She was the wife of the governor at the time, and her view of it was liberty and the oppression that was coming from the big government, which was England at the time. I see similarities, and that is what the current Tea Party was railing against, saying, why are we being oppressed from what is going on with the huge regulations and government overtaxation, and making it just harder and harder for us to survive and thrive, and just getting into every little aspect of our business. So in that way, I identify with the Tea Party.
You do. Excellent. All right. Well, great. Well, I'd like to thank you both for coming, and I appreciate you both taking time to join us on this evening, and I hope it's been informative and constructive for everybody at home as well. Thank you so much to Mayor Lonegan and to Dr. Eck for coming in.
Thanks so much.
All right, folks. We have, of course, a quick programming note. As I mentioned off the top of the show, this is the first of 2 debates that we're going to be bringing you right here on News 12 New Jersey. Now, a week from tomorrow, next Thursday, we're going to be bringing you the Democratic debate for U.S. Senate. That will be live from WBGO studios in Newark, and just like tonight, it starts at 7 p.m. I would again like to thank Mayor Steve Lonegan and Dr. Alieta Eck for joining us this evening. I'm Luke Margolis. Thanks so much for joining us here on the Republican primary debate for the U.S. Senate right here on News 12 New Jersey. Have a great night, folks.